Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah. Welcome to Islamic Finance Podcast with me, Almir, and Maryam. How was your day?
Busy one. Yeah, I enjoy taking advantage of the nice weather.
Exams are over?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. Are you ready for this today's episode? Do you have your tea?
Yes.
And I hope our listeners, they are ready to join us for a simultaneous sip, unparalleled pleasure of the week. In 3, 2, 1, Bismillah. Beautiful. You can't beat coffee. That's the thing. You know, in the past, when they first started making coffee, it was not very popular because it was considered to be almost like a drink that people who are very, how would you call it, not very respectable would drink. And the reason was that usually people who go to coffee houses at that time, it was like almost like nightclubs today. They would drink this drink and it would make them a little bit more active and engaged. So they actually issued fatwa in early days that coffee was haram. Yeah. Then the scholars went into long discussions about it and alhamdulillah. So we evolved from that opinion. Today, I want to talk a little bit about money. Whole of this season is about the contracts and transactions. One of the key components in all of that is money. What is money? Just recently, I was observing some messages back and forth amongst some friends and colleagues, and there was a discussion about money. What's the money? Is it a debt? Is it something that is real, tangible? As I was thinking about it, I thought it would be maybe a good idea to address this whole topic of what is money? How do we understand it? Where it comes from? And that is a very important part of the contract payment or consideration. Since the early days, people used to trade and exchange something. First and the most easiest is to exchange what you have. I have something, you have something, we exchange. Maybe I have apples, you have milk, we exchange that. But the problem with that is it's very hard to get what you want when you need it. And I don't always need milk and you don't always need apple. But also there was this idea where people would deposit, like let's say gold, and they would write them like a certificate of that deposit. There would be a note, I owe you something, I owe you. So it was a kind of a debt. And then people could use that piece of paper to go to someone who needed that and say, well, I have this much gold or this sheep or something, and I'll give you this paper, and then you give me whatever you need. So that became like a type of intermediary, something that helps us buy and sell. Now, these IOUs or debt were highly unreliable as currency. So you would have to trust person who holds in trust that asset, let's say gold, and there would be no official guarantee that anyone would accept that. Like money, for example, of today. We trust it because a government made the money, paper money, as a legal tender. So what do we mean by legal tender? Reserve Bank of Australia, which is central bank, consider it a form of payment recognized by a legal system, such that when it's offered, that's why it's tendered. It's like legal tender means when it's offered tendered in payment of a debt, the debt is legally discharged. So the creditor cannot refuse a legal tender and then later pursue the debtor in court for that debt. So that's why banknotes are legal tender under the Reserve Bank Act in Australia, and coins are also legal tender under the Currency Act. So the system of money where the currency of a country is not backed by physical commodity, for example gold, but by directive from a government that makes it legal, this is called fiat system. By legal, political, and so on, a decree of a government, it's now accepted as a payment for debt, to settle the debt. With the IOU, you don't know if there is a debt, is that still outstanding, will that be honored? So this is why government introduced the legal aspect in this equation. So what is then IOU or a debt? It's basically acknowledgement of debt. It represents the ownership of the actual debt. So now, discussion that I had with people was about, since we are not using this IOU anymore, that is the origin of what later led to money. Is this current money similar like that form of a debt? So what would be implication of that? If our money, let's say our currency, dollars, if they represent some kind of a debt, then whenever you're using it to pay, all of those rules of riba would kick in regarding the debt. So that would be quite problematic. One of the way that they think about it, when we print money, what is its intrinsic value? It's like your monopoly money. It doesn't have anything, no gold, no silver and everything. So that gives government ability to print as much money as they want. The way that they do that is government, central bank, would normally issue either banknotes or coins or electronic money. And they would usually use that to buy some assets. For example, certain bonds. They would sell that money basically to the banks, and then banks would write loans. So what starts happening with this is that once you sell that money by buying that bond, the bank lends that money, and then people use that loan to buy something, and then that money again goes back into the banks. So it starts moving around in economy, that money. Those who say and are very vocal against this idea of paper money, they call it haram, debt. They associate it with all kinds of injustice. What they are saying is that once this money goes out like this by purchasing bond, it creates a debt. So in their mind, they see that debt as a basis of that currency, that paper money represent like certificate for the debt that is being created once the money goes in circulation. Have you read about this fractional banking? It's this idea where you deposit with the bank some money, and then they use that deposit to give a loan.
Yes, I do know this.
And so once they use that as a loan, somebody buys something with that money, and it ends up in another deposit. And so it moves and it creates one deposit after another. Because whenever you take a loan, you spend it, that will go back into some bank. So if we consider all of the banks as one bank, so it just moves around. Now, every time it does this, there is a bit of it which is taken to be reserved just to stabilize the system, so you don't do unlimited recycling. But what ends up happening is that you create, quote unquote, this secondary money. So the first money is what reserve banks create, that's paper or digits. That's usually called M0. It's like basis of money. That is the money.
Yeah.
And then through the banking, through these deposits, we have something called M1, which is very liquid assets, which are also, and that's what confuses sometimes situation. This is also called money. But difference is that if you have a cash, let's say we call it M0, first one, you can immediately spend it. Deposit, you can also, like cash, just tap your card or something, access that. But now it's guaranteed by a bank. If everybody tries to access money at once, there is not enough money. Yeah. So they say the banks then create that money, deposit money. More you put money into banks longer term, it creates, again, different label for this money. So they have M0, M1, M2, M3. So longer, less liquid this money is. In terms of real money, there's only money that central bank issued, or they call it created. But all of this other money starts circulating through loans and deposit and creates all of these deposits that we also consider money. So the way to think about is like this. Let's say there are three people. I have $100, and that's the only $100 there is. So I give you deposit. You are the bank. I give you that as a deposit. And then you do something with that money, or you deposit it to another bank. Maybe you gave it as a loan and somebody spent it and goes to another bank. That other bank does the same and it goes to another bank. Now, what will start happening? This $100 jump from me to you to another person to another person. So when we think about accounting, each one of us can account, or they have some kind of an asset of 100. Yeah. So each one of us has got now $100 in some deposit. So for the people who say the banks create money, they think, look, now $400 is created out of nothing. So, but it's only if you consider that these deposits are money, because you also have liability. That's just money going from one person to another, and you are looking only one side of equation, that somebody need to give me $100, someone owes me, or I deposited that 100 with somebody. You see that?
Yeah.
They almost think like we have now $400 new in the market. But that's just what money does. When you spend it, the same effect could be done with gold and any other currency. Based on that, they say, look, central bank can print this money. They call it quantitative easing, when there's increased supply of money in economy by the way of buying these securities and assets. And then these other banks that works with central bank, private bank, they create even more money supply. So they say that this is all riba. Debt on debt on debt, and it's all riba, and it's all haram, and it's all need to be considered when we are buying and selling. On top of that, they say that it doesn't have intrinsic value. So what do we now do with this question?
In my head, I'm thinking, what's the alternative? Because at the moment, anything that people would accept as cash or as, the consideration would be these legal tenders, this fiat money.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the alternative?
When people usually think about this question from Islamic perspective, they go back to some discussion where scholars used to discuss about making money from the skin of animals or from other copper coins. This idea that money must be gold and silver, it's not necessarily supported by any kind of Sharia evidence. You might find in Quran, Allah mentioned that people love or they have desire for certain things like gold and silver. But that doesn't mean that that must be a payment, money. Because in the same verse, horses and farmland are also mentioned. So nobody would argue based on that the only transportation today is a horse, because it mentioned that we like that. Or that only farmland is the way to make profit or something like that. So in the same way, why would you argue that the only way for your money to be legitimate is gold and silver? And the Prophet ﷺ did not make his own money. We used the other people gold and silver, and it only later we started to mint our own coins. When you look at money, it is something that is customarily accepted by people.
Yeah.
Something that people trust. When I pay and I get paid, it will preserve some value. So if people accept that, then that's what we consider the money. So money is never about material. It's not sought for what it is in itself. Like people say, what is its intrinsic value? Intrinsic value comes in this.
Comes from what people trust.
That's right.
If people didn't trust it, then it wouldn't have the value that it has, or it wouldn't be money.
That's where intrinsic value is linked with. You cannot just increase its supply and therefore debase whatever is in the economy.
Yeah.
With this current money, you go to some countries like Venezuela. When they start printing money, they do it in unlimited way. And so money is something that is linked with your economic activities. So you have a relationship with how much money there is versus economic activities. It's a very basic idea. But, when sometimes people say, but why don't you just print all the money? And we can all buy homes and we can all have free education and healthcare and everything. It's because that relationship between quantity of money and its value is affected by economic activities. So suddenly if you double the money,
it's half the value. Everything else will double. It's not right. So if you double the amount of money you have in the economy, then buying a house will double. This will double. Everything will double.
Everything will. That's right.
It doesn't stay same.
So then these central banks, what they're trying to do, they're trying to balance these economic activities with how much there is money out there in terms of inflation, its cost. This is like your interest rates typically. So with all of this, what they're trying to do is they try to stabilize this financial system. Back to the idea of what is then this money? Is it really a debt? I would say that people who make that assumption, they made at the beginning step, they made a wrong judgment call. They say origin of the money is when person used to give a gold to someone and they issue them with certificate of IOU. We agree that would represent ownership some sort of liability. Yeah. So if I give you my money, gold, I get that note. So I replace my gold for the note. When people talk about government creating money, so government can, as we said, print or electronically send money, and they do it by buying some security. So let's say they go to these banks. Banks would normally issue like a bond or existing mortgage-backed security. They would then purchase that from a bank. So what would happen is that in order to stimulate economy, increase, let's say, amount of money so that bank, let's say now after Corona, you want bank to start giving loans, to give money to businesses. You want this money to be also cheap. You need to increase supply. So you would start buying the bonds from the banks in order for them to get a lot more money so that they can stimulate economy, spend it, give loans. So now, before banks get money, you need to create that money. Whether you create money as a paper money or a coins or electronics digits, this is your reserve. So you create that money. Either you print it or you prepare it, how much you limit. Just like in your bank account with the bank. This is how much we are sending out. These central bankers every day, they buy and sell this in order to manage economy. So they have this amount and then they're buying these bonds. And everybody can buy these bonds. So when you buy that bond, you give money and they give you debt. What people confuse here is, now remember in the first case, result of lending gold created liability, which is a debt. And that paper which says this such and such person owes me 100 grams of gold. Now that paper is a bond. Just to clarify what I was saying here, this is an addition. As I was listening to this recording, I wanted to make sure that this point is very clear. What I'm trying to say here is that the IOU or ownership of debt goes to the owner of the gold who deposited it initially. IOU does not follow the gold. One who is receiving gold does not get that same IOU note. He is issuing IOU note and gives it for the gold in exchange for the gold. So here, when government sells or deposits money, banks is issuing IOU and they get money. IOU note or a debt is actually the bond itself, and it is with the central bank. So it's not the money that is IOU, it's the bond that is actually a record of the debt. Where the people who are analyzing this make mistake is that they then think that that money is receipt of the transaction. But receipt or a debt goes to whoever paid the money. Why would, you get it? Why would a bank that sells the debt get also receipt that they owned some sort of an asset? See, the person who gave gold got certificate on that gold. Person who gave money, central bank that gave money, they got certificate or a bond that they have they have asset, and you are liable to pay that. Bank didn't get that bond, didn't get that IOU. So the bond, if anything, IOU of the old is a bond in the quantitative easing, and the money is just like gold. Now that money, as we said, it's not backed by anything. It's just government issue as a legal tender, and people trust government that they will manage it. Every government differently. Some government they trust less, some government more. In Australia, fairly, maybe not 100%, but because the target rate, there is a sum of inflation and so on. So with this inflation, they are increasing more than what it's needed, this supply of money. So ideally, you would want that there is no inflation, that supply of money match economic activity, so it's always keep the value. I mean, it's a difficult topic to think Islamically, but even if you had state, I don't think we can dismiss immediately idea of having paper currency that is managed in a fair way. And that's issue is, how do you do it in a fair way? At what level? Because when you have inflation, you are printing more money, and in reality, it's like stealing money from other people because you are taking bit of their money by increasing. It's just like when you have a liter of milk and you add some water. That's inflation. So quantity increases, and even if you grab the same cup, it's less already. Although in terms of it's maybe 200 ml, but there is less milk if you keep adding that. So this is a problem with, we could say that money is unethical because it can be manipulated and depends on how much government manipulated. But overall, we cannot say it represents debt. They then go and talk about how that money is used by a bank to create those deposits, which we call creation of the money. But that's, again, secondary thing. You see, even if I had gold, and if bank used that gold fractionally to give it as a loan and create deposit, when I get that gold, it's still gold. Doesn't matter for me how did 10 other people use that gold. Once that gold reach for me, I use that gold as I see fit. It does not diminish halalness of the gold.
Based on how it's traveled.
That's right. So somebody already borrow it, they charge riba on it and this and that, and then they come to buy milk from you and you sell the milk and they give you gold. Like that's a goal for me. I don't care what happened in the past. So that mechanism governments used, they obviously understand. They regulate that by certain measures. It's like an echo of the money that serves the economy. That's how the economy works. That's what money is supposed to do. Travel around, move around, serve people. It's just used in that system of banking, which we disagree, but that system can work same way, fractional reserve, meaning with the gold in the same way, just like with fiat. Fiat is a little bit easier because you can more rapidly, with gold, you have that element where you cannot just back your money that easily. You have to have a gold. But that aside, fractional reserve problem is still there. So when we then think about money, we could say that whatever is widely accepted means of payment or a medium of exchange and serve as a unit of account and store of value, we can accept in reality as money. Gold was great when we used it because it was benchmark and you could trust and you can see it. And when we talk about in the past when rulers used to debase currency, they would mix sometimes some copper or something in coins in order to save gold for themselves. And they would then force pure money to be exchanged for this diluted money. The problem there was, again, some sort of deception. And riba because you're exchanging unequal amounts of money for money. Which is why Ibn Taymiyyah always used to say to the rulers, don't make minting money as a money-making business. Don't make it in a way that it debase the currency which is outside. Make it to be fair. Many of his and other scholar statements indicate that money is not something that is meant for itself. It's meant to perform certain function. In 1982, Islamic Fiqh Academy in its 5th session issued a ruling of paper money, and they said that the origin of money is gold and silver. The characteristic of riba that occurs within them is due to their measure of wealth and store of value, based on the strongest view among the scholars. The characteristic of the store of value is not limited to only gold and silver, even though originally it was so. The paper currency that exists today, they said, has become a store of value and has replaced gold and silver as a means of payment because the community has accepted it as store of value and a means of payment, even if its value is not the paper, but a trust that is placed in its commercial dealings. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Often people, when they speculate about these things, they say, but who decides the value of money? Government just prints and they put on any paper, this is $1, this is $5, this is whatever. Well, that's how they manage that. You then, based on knowing the quantity of that money and what it stands for, and based on all of these relationships between economic activities, you, market participant, decide, I will sell my house for $100,000. In a free society, you are free to price, give offer and acceptance. Nobody's forcing you to say how much you will sell your car for. You can ask whatever you want. Some place coffee is $1, some place $2, $5. Some coffees I've seen $20. I've seen with my son watching the other day, he was showing me somebody's going around and tasting the burgers. And one burger is $5, another one $20, another one $500.
Yeah.
So you can make your own things and price, and nobody will ask you. So it's a free floating. And other people, when it comes to exchanging your money, what they will give you for, what they will take. And again, they will judge that based on what's your country doing, how it is stability-wise. We see in Turkey now, because of lots of attacks, a lot of different things happening, lira is going up and down. This is very fluid thing. Sometimes these markets are attacked. There is other interferences. You need to defend it. So we see that political and economic strength of the country dictates that stability. So more stable indicates more political and economic strength of a country. And that is what people trust. Some may say, but gold and silver are exempt from market volatility. This is not true, because if you look at during global financial crisis, when dollar lost value, yes, gold was seen as more safe asset and investment, and people bought it more and its price went up. But at the same time, when after that equities and money became more attractive, people sold gold and it lost value. Even historically, ratio for zakat in terms of gold to silver, this ratio changed very much as gold appreciated more than silver. So now that ratio, like a currency exchange ratio, is different than what it used to be. So if you pay zakat according to the price of gold, it will be one amount, maybe let's say $5,000 according to today's prices. If you calculate it by silver, it will be 500. We as people do not value these two materials same. We value them differently. We have different utility from them. So it's not true when we are looking at the price that we say that gold and silver is exempt. The issue is that even gold and silver is priced in paper money. That is the issue that we are talking about. What is the reality of what we are using as a money today? And that is not to say that our preference is paper, which can be manipulated over something that is natural like gold, but that is just reality of what we have today. It's not just piece of paper. Just like if you look at university degree, we don't say Harvard business degree is just piece of paper. Or I will just issue you my own certificate, Bok University from my backyard, and I will give you also a piece of paper, and Harvard University give you a piece of paper, both pieces of paper. But people trust institution and what that piece of paper stands for. What the government does, they guarantee that it will be genuine, it will be accepted, you will be able to pay your taxes, pay your debts with this. Otherwise, if you give me a chicken and this one give me a certificate that he deposit some sheep, I don't know if I'm going to accept that as a payment. That is different IOU. So with this one, there is no IOU, there is no debt. Nobody is waiting to be repaid. It is the customary practice. And we ourselves derived through the commerce, through experience, what is each value of these papers is. It is something that is made up thing. It is not that. It is made up thing that we customarily give it certain value through this management of the currency. Yeah. If we open floodgate, it will lose the value, will become Venezuela. Is printing money debasing it? Printing money is a form of debasing. It does interfere. So this is where Islamically, I think still research needs to be done. If you were to have a country that accepts, let's say, paper money, what would be the role of central bank? How much they would supply money? Where would be the justice so that you don't debase money, but it makes it as something that is source of ease and facilitate these transactions. So the question is creation of money then a ribavi transaction? I would say, in my humble opinion, that governments create money, whether digits or notes or coins, and then they put it in the circulation through ribawi transaction. But that doesn't make money ribawi in terms of that it's a debt. It is ribawi asset in a sense that rules of riba apply on it, just like rules of zakat and so on. So all of the rules that apply on gold and silver, I would say that they apply. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't apply on money. Some difference in some schools, some scholars. But in general, as far as I have seen, most of people would say that all of these rules would apply. And that yes, money is permissible. It is not a debt. But through the loans and other mechanism, it is put in the circulation, and banks, through their intermediary process, they make it available and they issue loans and money starts to circulate. So that circulation here issue is the circulation comes through riba, but nevertheless it circulates and it creates deposits. What we can say about the money is that it's something that is source of ease and it is a customary practice that can be accepted. In terms of any other future money like bitcoins and other things, I have been very critical. It's not used in commerce and it's terrible store of value and has a deficiency in technology. So I wouldn't call it a money. But what can we expect to see as a future of money? We can expect that as long as people continue to trade with each other, we will see this evolution of the money. In the past, we used to use barter, we used to use different metals, now we use paper. In the future, will that be something that is electronic, or who knows how we will transact, but there will be a need for us to transact in some way. And money will continue changing with our custom, and whatever we trust and whatever fulfills that purpose will be trusted. And that is something that societies decide on. Because if it was simple matter of printing money and then by decree of government you trust it, then all of these socialist countries, their money would be trusted. And I tell you, I remember in Yugoslavia, they had hyperinflation. Money was printed. One day they decided to remove 6 zeros from the money. Do you think it increased in any value? Nothing. Nobody trusted it. Nobody trusted it because they know it's just worthless. You cannot force people to trust it. You can make it legal tender, but the trust will come either from intrinsic value and property if you have, let's say, gold, which is very difficult these days, or how you manage it. And for people who say that it must be gold and silver, I'm afraid that it's been popularized as this is like a sunnah money, but there is no evidence for that. There is no real evidence for that. I usually say to the people, money is something that follows and it goes where to the people who are producing things. So what we should be worried about is, are we producers? Are we benefiting people? Because money will follow these people. And if we want to solve real problems that we have, it's not going to be solved with what metal you or material you use as money. The real economic problems and solutions are in what people are doing. That is the key. Human resource is the key. That's why one of the story companions were sitting in this room. I think Umar asked them, wish for something. And one of them said, I wish I have this room full of, gold and silver and spend it fi sabilillah. And then he said, wish for something. And some other one says, I wish I have like gems and all of these other valuable materials. So one after another, they wish that room was filled with this material. And then one of them noticed that Umar was not very happy with his answer. So he said, okay, you wish for something. So he said to them, I wish this room full of people like such and such and such and such and such and such. What we see in this is that he understood that the core of the progress of society is not money. It's a human resource is the core that utilize all of the other resources. This is where you get the strength. And that's why some of the richest companies, who are there today? Those who produce something, who benefit people. And so that's why we should not have this obsession with money in terms of what it is, in terms of what material, and that we wait to activate ourselves only when that becomes. That, I'm afraid, is not justifiable. It's not a good excuse. There's a lot of probably questions, and maybe I didn't explain the whole concept, But in the future, we might have a little bit longer presentation about money and so on. But that's what it is. Money, it's something that is present. It's something that is not dead. Yes, doesn't have anything, but it's what it stands for. But we accepted social contracts among us that that's how we're going to value it. We have a trust that what it's written, it will stay in terms of the value, and it's managed responsibly in those countries that do it in such a way. And we could say that if the governments, and most of governments are abusing it often, we could more say that is sometimes unethical how they are using that in terms of the printing and being irresponsible. And that, of course, extends to all other irresponsible regulations in terms of the banking, predatory lending, and all of these other practices that harm people. That's why riba is prohibited. So we have to separate what is the money, how it was created, and then how it was put in circulation, and then what people do with it as three separate areas. But just on this one, that's what money is. The rest of the things, that's why we're studying these things so we can come up with a better system. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much for listening. Assalamu alaikum.